Okay, Alex. So if we're an athlete and our primary concern is performance, but for whatever reason we need to lose body fat, maybe not necessarily body weight, but body fat is our primary concern. Where are we starting? We're straight and narrow, no funny business. We're strictly by WADA guidelines. Where are we kind of what's the first place we'd start? Like even as base as you can make it. Like what are we looking at the very start?
It's fun. I think the actual best place to start is going to be actually over in the fatty acid world. So a lot of these kind of tools, they're coming to us mainly from the longevity community. And again, 5, 6 years ago, started to utilize them with a lot of my athletes and saw the validity, especially in the Olympic sports. Anyone drug tested, these are over-the-counter natural supplements, and they're starting to get so much traction finally. It's taken like a decade for a lot of these things to catch on, but they're finally getting there. I think that's a really cool basic place to start. So I think the first one is going to be the plasmalogen conversation. So if we look at plasmalogens, we're going to look mainly at an omega-3 and omega-9 variety. So plasmalogens essentially exist in every portion of our body, every cell, every organ, all that cool stuff. When babies are born, they're plasmalogen deficient. They get it through breast milk. So right out of the gate, you think, oh, that's probably pretty important if it's in breast milk. Now, you can get it through some different sources of food, but that's really too hard to get for a lot of people. So instead, as we age, again, once we hit about 30, those levels start to go down. They're usually correlated. And again, correlation doesn't equal causation, but they're very heavily correlated with dysfunction overall, health-based problems, detriments in performance. Like everything can kind of be traced back to a couple things. One of them is these plasmalogen levels. So if we look at what they do in neurological tissue, because this is like really important for athletes. If we can imagine we have our neuron and it's covered in that myelin sheath, right? You get a TBI, you start overtraining, you start having like some serious neurological strain and stress. TBI world starts to demyelinate. If you start having that overstress of just overtraining, the demyelination process doesn't really happen, but you start seeing dysfunction at that neuronal level. What these plasmalogens will do is it will remyelinate literally within seconds. So you literally cannot get a TBI if you have plasmalogens in your system, which is really cool because now over in the NFL world, MMA guys, like I have all of my people taking these because not getting a TBI is pretty big, right? You go over to the Olympic weightlifting world, pretty much any sport, and we have two main products that can drive direct performance neurologically or more recovery. So you need both, right? Everyone likes to just drive performance, but at the end of the day, if you can't recover from it, especially as a natural athlete, it doesn't really matter. So if we look first at that omega, so we're gonna go omega-3, omega-9. That first one we are looking at, and specific, I always like to give, shout outs to supplements that are really good products. Prodrum. Prodrum is the only place I'd send plasmalogen, or I'd send people to for plasmalogens. They have a neuro and a glial version. The neuro version is working more on the kind of like that gray matter based, where it's more of the process speed. So if you are trying to learn a squat pattern better, if you were trying to learn a deadlifting pattern better, a punching pattern better, anything that you're trying to learn from a motor skill aspect, you're going to want to push that neural factor. So that's the actual plasmalogen neuro. If you look at the glia version, that's the one that handles more of the white matter. That's more of the repair-based process. So if you can literally pair your days, you have the neuro in the morning or pre-workout to drive performance during the workout, and then to overall drive the recovery at night, you have the glia version. What you end up seeing is all of a sudden your motor patterns start to improve. All of a sudden, squat feels easier. I like the squat because it's an easy example, right? Your squat starts to feel better. You go in and out of the hole super efficiently. Your walkout, everything seems so much more crisp and clear. And then you wake up, you're feeling more recovered. Even after heavy squat days, deadlift days, whatever, you're waking up feeling completely repaired. So I feel like starting off this conversation with fat loss and recovery in mind, starting off with these fatty acids are extremely important, right? So that's just two of these fatty acids. If we go down another one, I think a really cool one to talk about is going to be carbon 60. So again, fatty acid, been around for a while now. It's actually a carbon allotrope. All that means, looks like a soccer ball. Tons of carbons. It's funny because it was originally used as an industrial lubricant. They wanted to check the LD50 to see how much you could ingest before you died. And they did this, I think it was in mice. And all of a sudden, they saw like a 93% improvement in longevity. Now, crazy numbers, doesn't hold up with humans, but the longevity driver does hold up in humans, just not to that degree. Like 93% is not going to happen, but a good amount's going to. You look at the underlying mechanisms, and what it does is twofold, on top of many other things, but the two biggest ones I like to talk about in the performance world is it pulls off all the oxidative load from mitochondria. Number two, it drives up all those detox cascades and pathways in every single organ and cell in your body. So what we hear, detox, cool, we'll get healthier. Everyone wants to be healthier, but for the performance specific side of things, if you have dysfunctional mitochondria, you are not going to be performing optimally. You are not going to be able to drive beta oxidation as efficiently as you can. So if we are pulling the oxidative load off of mitochondria, they can now start to work more efficiently. So Carbon 60, the product, again, like to give shout outs to everyone. Wizard Sciences makes an amazing product. It's Elixir, and they're about to actually bring out a whole quantum charge line. I talked with the guy yesterday. I didn't know that. So tons of cool stuff going on over there, but that is a really good product to get your Carbon 60. So, okay.
So Alex, so you're kind of looking at this from, are we assuming there's a caloric deficit here, or are you making sure that before you start losing fat that you're in a pretty healthy place? Is that
regardless? These are things that I would like to bring in mostly year round for a lot of people, depending on budget, because these are kind of these obscure products that aren't really mainstream yet. They are more expensive. Like the Prodrum Neuro is probably, I think, the most expensive there. The Glia is a little less, and then the Carbon 60 is a little more affordable, but they're still higher ticket products, but they work that well. So ideally, we would start all of these in the off-season caloric surplus, because we're trying to function at a mitochondrial level and a stress-based level and a neurological level pretty much year-round. That way it sets you up, because if you have dysfunctional mitochondria in a caloric surplus, then you're going to be gaining body fat. You're going to be not able to fire musculature properly. So your squat's not going to be as good as it could be. So a lot of people don't notice that dysregulation, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm progressing, I'm adding whatever, a kilo a week, like whatever arbitrary number there. And then you add in some products like these, and all of a sudden you're adding 5 kilos, 10 kilos, things like that out of nowhere. And in reality, that's just because you had poor functioning mitochondria and neurological action. So although it's used year round, ideally you would start this in kind of a surplus phase, just so you can get a better feel. Obviously, when you have more energy in circulation, recovery is going to go up anyway. So you can kind of build up like this whole, this runway, so that by the time you get to the end of your competition prep, whatever sport's going to be, you have enough built up mitochondrial action to be able to not suffer in a deficit. Because that's the whole goal. Because, not in the bodybuilding world, we're looking at actual strength-based athletes. Performance is the only thing that matters. And then if you have to make a weight category, that's the only thing that matters. Body composition really doesn't matter. Yeah, lean tissue matters to a degree, but I mean, how many people have we seen that look like sticks and yet they are stronger than anyone out there? So there's a lot more neurological volition. There's leverages. There's so many other mechanics that are involved. So to me, I'd rather look at that internal environment more so than the external. And then again, weight's just about making weight for your weight class.
So could we feasibly start in a place where maybe metabolically not as pristine as we could be? Could we start at a place where at maintenance calories, and it's for sure maintenance, you've been tracking calories and macros. So if we assume that, could you be a place where you try optimizing some of these things and see some fat loss without an initial change in calories?
For sure, yes. So if you're starting at that maintenance phase and you start at a cellular level working more efficiently, you're going to start getting better at that parasympathetic beta oxidative cascade. So all of a sudden, when you're at rest to those 20 hours a day when you're not training, you're getting better at pulling off and liberating fat from adipocytes, from fat cells, and utilizing that to just fuel your day. Like us talking right now, I know you guys personally, you guys are very good at that PBO system. I know I'm very efficient. Even with my torn quad, I know I'm very efficient with that PBO system. So we want to get to that position, and you can, if you're at maintenance calories, you're just going to slowly recomp, which is kind of the best for everyone, because although we said body composition doesn't matter, if you have more muscle tissue and you have better functioning mitochondria, more than likely you're going to partition nutrients better, recover better, feel better, perform better, and then lose fat easier.
Alex, in the kind of strength and power world, a lot of the time I think people don't really pay much attention to that mitochondrial side of things, because they're thinking highly glycolytic, we're very much on the kind of fast twitch, not aerobic side of things. Can you touch a small bit on where some of that mitochondrial dysfunction or damage might have occurred?
So it's actually funny. It's exactly what you said. So if you look at the basic, Le Chatelier's principle, some of the most basic concepts out there, what will happen is if we are getting so strong at one cascade, right, at that alactic world, whatever, what are we lacking over here? That glycolytic world is so poor. That mitochondrial world is so poor. So you get good at what you get good at what you practice and what you do all the time. So if you are the person who is constantly just hammering the 1 rep maxes or constantly just doing pure alactic work in only in that very narrow mindset, then you're going to start lacking in other energetic cascades. So if we look at like this previous at the Paris Olympics, I had 23 people over there, and almost with all of them, when we first started working together a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, the first thing we had to do was exactly that. We had to get them out of this dogmatic practice, because most coaches in that world, it's very, you train this way, you've been doing it for 40 years, and they're awesome people, I'm not saying anything bad about them, but it's very much, you're either alactic or you're glycolytic, or it's like very one or the other, black and white. And I always see it as, oh, if we fix all your energetic spectrums, it's just going to potentiate your strength. So you get better at your weakness, Le Chatelier's principle, it'll potentiate your strength. So usually that's why they are avoiding that mitochondrial work. And again, it's tough to say that, because no matter what, if you're training, if you're breathing, if you're walking outside, there's going to be obviously mitochondrial action. Like, you can't get around that. It's more the other bits of energetics that are lagging behind, all the enzymes that get produced and all that fun stuff. So it's usually that. It's usually the training they've done that kind of pigeonholes them into just one energetic cascade.
Okay, so let's say we spent maybe a year covering kind of mitochondrial health. We've optimized different aspects, again, I suppose with the base assumption that we're definitely in control of our food intake and calories. Where are we kind of going next after that? Again, still pretty straight and narrow, I think, OTC kind of idea.
Yep.
What's kind of
I think maybe at that point, then we kind of cap off that process with one more fatty acid. Then I'll get off the fatty acid train. This one's really cool, going back to the longevity community. Again, things we've been doing over there for over a decade that are now catching steam over here in the strength and powerlifting and strongman and all the athletics, really, Olympic lifting. It's Fatty 15. Fatty 15 is really cool. So if we look at this process called ferroptosis, it's another way of programmed cell death. So what we see in the dysfunctional sick world is people are starting to have these senescent cells, these cells that cause a lot of damage because of this process of ferroptosis. So we see that also then go over into the strength community. We see that going over into the Olympic lifting community, because we have these people that are training so hard. Some people, again, going back to the Olympics, doing 2 a days, 3 a days. They're doing that every single day. They're damaging their system so much. So they have a massive accumulation of all these senescent cells, which, again, are going around basically causing damage. We need some senescent cells, because if you don't have any, then you're not going to be able to adapt, but everything exists in that ratio. So if we look at this world, one of the easiest ways to stop that ferroptosis process, one of the easiest ways to drive all this management of systemic fatigue, that again, if we've gone through this process of maintenance calories, we did maybe our carbon 60, our plasmalogens, now we make sure we are as healthy as possible, because the other one's going to be the main energetic players. This is going to be the health player that's going to set us up for recovery and improve nutrient partitioning to then go into the fat loss phase. So fatty 15, again, if you look at saturated fatty acids, those even ones, 16, 18, are going to have more pro-inflammatory action. Odd, like 15, is going to have the anti-inflammatory action. So that means it's going to drive up AMPK to a massive extent. Another cool one, everyone over in the peptide community loves talking about PPAR, so peroxisome proliferated activated receptor, and all the different subunits that get activated. This actually activates 2 of them to a major, massive degree. And again, it's an over-the-counter supplement. They're trying to classify it, I think, now as an essential fatty acid, which I hope it happens, because I love my fish oils. Like, everyone should be taking fish oils, but it's kind of like, you should be having your fatty 15 even before those. It's that essential and critical to every cell in our body. So this is not only managing ferroptosis, driving down senescent cell accumulation, it's directly driving performance through those PPAR cascades. It's driving nutrient partitioning, because you're having better cellular communication. You go down the list, and it's kind of an overall good player to cap off that process of, okay, cool, we fixed the baseline mitochondrial problems, let's finish off the cellular problems, keep getting better at nutrient partitioning, at mitochondrial action, and now, okay, cool, now you diet, now you're good.
So if we kind of stay on that, excuse me, that side of the kind of spectrum, how important here is actual food quality? So if we're assuming, calories for calories, this is something that's been argued for years in the industry, for as long as I think we've been involved. You'll always hear conversations, and if it fits your macros came in, and people definitely lose fat. But how big a concern is it for you in regards to athletes performing high? We see clips like Usain Bolt ate chicken nuggets before he ran the 968. how important you see it is in this kind of a field where you're trying to keep performance high? Like, how big a deal is food quality, just the
Yep.
actual foods you're eating?
Massively contextually important. So what I mean by that is if you're an athlete, you're going to automatically partition and utilize foods differently. Someone like Usain Bolt in that kind of scenario, I mean, you're about to burn through thousands of calories. You can eat whatever you freaking want as an athlete. That's why a lot of those Olympic athletes will do McDonald's, easy to digest, and in that moment they can get that immediate energy. If they were trying to get 1,000 calories, 2,000 calories from food from like sweet potatoes or from rice, it's going to sit in their stomachs most likely. So contextually in that concept, in that scenario, food source doesn't matter. You have to base it off of digestion. But then you zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Obviously, calories are real. Obviously, calories matter. But you also can't argue that nutrient quality, density, and timing doesn't matter. And again, you can go through all the different thought experiments, but if we can correlate calories to scale weight changes, and then we'll say macronutrients, timing, food density to body composition, health, and performance changes, I think that's kind of the best way to look at it, because you have how many general population individuals that can just count calories? They could be having all of their calories coming from fats and carbs, no protein. They're still going to lose fat, right? We see that happen. You can't argue thermodynamics. But in that same conversation, if you break down the basic laws of thermodynamics, there's a dissipation law, there's that conservation law, there's another law that basically says this is what heat does. Like, that A to B to C doesn't happen the same way. Because if we go from glycolysis to the end product of ATP and reverse that with gluconeogenesis, it costs more ATP in that gluconeogenic-based world. So A to B to C, the traditional thermodynamic model doesn't hold up. But again, depending on the situation. So you had general population over here just trying to lose weight. Cool, start counting calories. It's a great practice. Once you start graduating and caring about your health, caring about performance, caring about body composition and longevity, you have to go over to then counting macronutrients. And then you go into food quality. And then you go into maybe nutrient timing. It's a slow, gradual process. I don't think everyone needs to be going crazy on meal plans and macros and all that fun stuff. But if we look at nutrient density, because that was one of the big questions you had, it's so important. And the problem is our society is getting more and more devoid of these nutrients. And that's why all the new pharmacology, all the new supplementation, like everything in the supplement-based world, it's why it's becoming more and more important for everyone. Because our population is getting sicker and sicker and sicker because of all these nutrient depletions. So you may think eating your spinaches and things like that are super healthy for you, right? Because you got your basic greens, like you should. And then you look at the oxalate content, you see the calcium accumulation, you start seeing the kidney stones or the calcium score starting to go up. And so you're kind of like, something that should be healthy on paper now is hurting me. What can I do? You look at the beef-based world, the reason why we want those, the grass-fed sources, actually what we talked about beforehand, that fatty 15 conversation. And it's actually funny, the fatty 15 content over in the grass-fed world, there's a specific, I can't remember, it's the elevation, it's a certain goat that eats a certain grass at a certain elevation, and that's technically like the best source. Like, no one's getting that, but that's exactly the problem, right? Like, we have such poor food sources these days. But then again, that should be the majority of your intake. Like, no, I don't think anyone would care if you have a Pop-Tart every day, because I know that's the classic, if it fits your macros example, But if you only eat Pop-Tarts for your carbohydrate source, well, you'll still lose weight and lose fat for sure. But where's your health at? Where's your performance at? Could it be better? So I think it's never, black and white is very gray, but I think there should always be that gradual process of, if you're going to the Olympics, and this is crazy, I know you guys know this, people in the Olympics, they don't count calories or macros. Like, one of the first things I do when I work with them is like, hey, what are you eating for a day? And they go, whatever I could find. And I'm like, what? Like, you're the best in the world and you're not counting your macros or calories, or there's no intra-workout shakes. And they've gotten there, number one, because of their work ethic, and then because of the genetics to back those up. So the genetic conversation, I hate saying first because it seems like it takes away from all the hard work they did. They bust their butt like everyone else. You're not going to be Simone Biles without a crazy work ethic. You're also not going to be Simone Biles without those actual genetic traits. So then you start complementing them with better quality food. And initially, maybe you don't even track calories. Maybe you just start saying, you know what, let's have some grass-fed beef for lunch every day just to start off. And then you slowly go down. Maybe we add some fruits in pre-workout to get more fructose, to blunt that excessive norepinephrine response. Here's a banana pre-workout. Like, you don't have to even tell a lot of your athletes all the reasons why, because sometimes it kind of gets in their head, but you can strategically place like, oh, banana here, beef here, to drive up all of those different recovery things that we actually need in drive performance. So long-winded way of saying it's all important, but where's your goal at? The more extreme your goal is and the more serious you take it, you should probably err on this side of more nutrient density, more nutrient timing, and stuff like that.
Sorry, Alex, just to stay on the food thing, one question I have is, so we've the lack of micronutrients being a problem, but can the presence of undesirables in maybe processed food, whatever way you want to define that, cause an inhibition in the fat loss, maybe in the long term, maybe not immediately, but do you ever see it being an indicator or an issue, the presence of whatever?
Usually the heavily processed sources, again, if we go back to moderation in an athlete, so anyone who is training hard, I consider an athlete, they will metabolize food differently. And so over in those athletic communities, you have a pizza once or twice a week with your family. I call them the deflux meals to flux some dopamine. You are storing, you're taking that fat, using it to fuel that beta oxidative process. You are also then sparing your glucose to be stored as intramuscular glycogen, and any kind of proteins are also being stored intramuscularly. That's the athlete, because they have muscle. They have blood flow to these areas, partitioning these nutrients there. General population person who just takes a walk maybe once a week, has wine every night with dinner, we're not talking just a glass, like 12 glasses, like the dysfunctional person doesn't have that PBO system, doesn't have that muscle tissue, and all of a sudden now everything is just getting stored as intramuscular fat. So if we're looking at it from that side of things, we start realizing, okay, though, moderation. If moderation's happening and you're exercising, you're fine. It's that abuse. Once you have that abuse and you start having those heavily processed foods, it'll actually modulate the TH ratios in your gut, so your immune system, and all of a sudden, HSCRP goes up. Interleukin 6 goes up. All these inflammatory markers start getting jacked up and going up because of the mismanagement of the immune system in your gut. So whenever you start crossing from an athletic world to more abuse of having a crazy high amount of processed foods, yeah, it'll definitely inhibit fat loss. It'll inhibit muscle gain. You'll get poor sleep quality. You'll have the poor gut problems. You have that distension. It'll do a lot of things.
Alex, a lot of people watching this are probably going to have clicked on it because they'll have seen a thumbnail or a title that has something to do with losing body fat or losing weight. And they're probably in the strength training population if they're watching our videos. And one of the most common things we get when somebody, maybe it's a one-to-one athlete or maybe it's somebody who's on the app, they'll start going through a weight loss phase and they're suddenly struggling with the actual intensity or actual work capacity in the training sessions themselves. Now, we worked together early this year and it was a big kind of fat loss and weight loss phase when I was doing a lot of running. And one thing was the massive impetus put on those intra workout shakes and the pre-workout kind of nutrient timings. Could you touch on that for somebody who maybe they're a weightlifter or a powerlifter looking to drop 5 kilos, but they're struggling in the sessions themselves?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because intra-workout, peri-workout nutrition to me is so important. Again, you're the first-time lifter, just get in the gym, get used to training, learn your motor patterns. But then as you graduate, first thing you throw in is maybe some essential amino acids during your workout. So we look at essential amino acids as being the thing to blunt excessive proteolysis. So basically excessive breakdown of muscle tissue. We want to take a little dip, a little hole, take a little hole in order to recover from and adapt out of, because everything is a stress adaptation response. Good old Dr. Hans Selye back in the day. That's exactly what we're going with here. If you are training extremely hard, not having those amino acids, even if your protein requirements are covered for the day, you're going to dig a bigger hole during that workout that then it's harder to recover from. If you're doing 2-a-days, that really matters. If you're squatting more than once a week, that really matters. So as you graduate up the scale of becoming more of a, we'll say an elite-based athlete, because you guys are both elite athletes in my book, you need those essential amino acids to blunt that excessive proteolysis. Then you go ahead and maybe you go down the creatine route. Again, we were talking beforehand about Mark Bell's podcast. I brought this up on there, but I absolutely love creatine. And everyone stops at 5 or 10 grams because that's all the research says. And yet I have seen some drastic, insane changes from people working their creatine doses up. the majority of people can get away with about 10 to 30 grams of total creatine daily, and they see massive improvements to ATP levels. So overall, just energy generation, overall power output. We generally see a good pull on intramuscular storage. So not sub-Q, intramuscular muscular fullness, that improves your leverages. We see some really cool things with working creatine up. What matters is at what point does it top off for you, and at what point do you get digestive problems. And if you do get digestive problems, try a different kind, the HCLs, tons of different ones out there. Find one you respond best to, and then you know your dose. Like for myself, it's about 20-ish grams, about 20 grams of creatine intra-workout every day. I notice a massive difference in my recovery, in my performance, and in my ability to store glycogen. So I just look slightly rounder and fuller. And maybe no one else realizes, but I notice a noticeable change. Like if I was going to come out and hang out with you guys, I'm taking my creatine beforehand because I want to impress you guys. I want to look big. Like, before I went to the Olympia, 2 weekends ago, I had my creatine with me because I want to at least look full when I'm there. And creatine is another massive one. And I prefer to have it intra-workout to get that little extra driver on glycogen storage. In reality, you could honestly make an argument for taking it pre-workout, taking it post-workout, taking it at other areas and times of the day, because the list of the health benefits of creatine is just going on and on and on. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting molecule like taurine in like 10 years, where people are going to be like, it solves everything, because it's one of those basic things that I think especially athletes need more of. So we have intra-workout, we have those essential amino acids, we have some creatine, then we go into the whole glucose carbohydrate conversation. Now, this goes back to how you digest things and also what level of an athlete you are. A lot of people have problems with dextrose. So if you're just having straight Gatorade powder or Carbogain off of Amazon, the big green or the big orange Now tub. My wife always makes fun of me when I used to buy it before. She'd say like the Arnold Schwarzenegger was like the Carbogain. Some people can get a lot of GI distress from that. If you get that GI distress, you go with a higher molecular weight carbohydrate, like a highly banned cyclic dextrin, like a carb 10, because it's going to move through the system, bloodstream a lot faster. And highly banned cyclic dextrin is that cone funnel shape, so it's also going to be pulling all those nutrients into the bloodstream and going straight into working muscle tissue. So I've been a big fan lately of like the Revive brand, the Raw Nutrition brand. They have a really good essential amino acid, a good bulk highly banned cyclic dextrin. Then we go into the whole electrolyte conversation too. So forget about sweat loss. Forget about, that fact that we're losing not only water, but sodium, chloride, magnesium, potassium. You go down the list, you're losing all these items from your sweat. We all kind of know that, right? What electrolytes are really cool for is, at least in my world, I see them through my lens as the intracellular communicators. So if we have a cell and we don't have the right ionic gradient, signals aren't going to be sent in. So it's not getting into the cell. That also means that whatever's in there, if there's any negatives, it can't come out. So having the right electrolyte ratios and balance for you in particular is going to improve that intracellular communication. So literally everything, like you'll feel it in the gym, you'll have better contractility, you'll have better motor patterns, everything feels easier. And although it's because you are sweating and losing it, it's also the fact that you just need more intracellular communication. So even if you're not sweating, I would still have your electrolytes. And again, you could also take those pre-workout. The timing doesn't matter as much, but I do prefer it being either pre or intra. Again, you can make arguments for other times of the day, for post-workout, for replenishment, lots of different ways to use it. But that to me would be the ideal intra-workout. And then if we kind of scroll back to the pre-workout scenario, I like a little bit of nitrogen, so a little bit of protein, obviously. We get a little bit of stimulus on mTOR, which you should kind of probably have protein at every meal. Like there's really no negative. That's the one macronutrient. It's the only thing that has that nitrogenous backbone. And you could eat protein like crazy. Like if I ever have someone who can't stick to their diet, I'm like, instead of eating, 3 bowls of popcorn or ordering a pizza, like cook up 2 pounds of chicken and eat that. And they get disgusted by it. They're like, I'm not going to eat that. It's like, that's your option. Like if you're having a binge eating problem, it's cool because that thermic effect of feeding goes up. Again, it's the only macronutrient with that nitrogenous backbone. Protein, nitrogen is so awesome. So I like to leverage that with a lot of people. So we'll work protein levels up, especially over in the natural community, because it's just the lowest hanging fruit, right? We don't have anything to drive nitrogen retention on that side of things, on the medical side of things. So instead, let's use our food to drive this nitrogen, right? So good little amount of protein. The amount will be dependent upon the person's digestive system, obviously. We don't want to be going into our sessions with a full stomach, because then you get inflammation, everything's going down there, and you're focused on digesting your food versus training. But a little bit of protein. If you're getting hypoglycemic during the workout, if it's a really long workout, you will want to have some fatty acids in there. This could be a time to bring in like the carbon 60s or the things we talked about beforehand. This could also be the time to maybe like bring in the salmon, so a little extra fats, you still get your protein in there, and your carbs. Depending on the person and how hard they are training, you can bring in a blend of glucose and fructose. So fructose to blunt that excessive norepinephrine response. So we literally spare more intramuscular glycogen, because if your liver's depleted, it's going straight to your intramuscular stores. So we don't want that to happen when we're training hard. And then obviously the glucose for that more immediate energy source. So you have that. We scroll over to the post-workout world, and this is where, again, I love working up supplements and foods just to see how you respond, how clients respond, because everyone's different. Not everyone, but I've personally worked up my protein post-workouts to 100 grams, and I noticed a massive difference in recovery. I've gone down to 75, 50, 25. I've gone up to 150, 200, and 100 is that sweet spot for me. A lot of people just need 30 or 50, though. They don't seem to get more benefits, but trial and error. This could be the great time for like a blended product with like, I just had Mark Bell's protein. It's blended with, it had beef, it had whey, and it had egg in there. I love that. There's also some organ meats in there too. There's also a time like I think it's up there, the isolate product, we can just take that post-workout, depending on the speed of digestion you need. Could also be time for like a hydrolyzed whey protein. So it's broken down into diene-tripeptides, basically pre-digested protein. So we have that protein, start off at 20, 30 grams, something like that, and work up based on your body weight, your needs, your recovery, all that fun stuff. And then a good amount of carbs, obviously, to replenish glycogen. And then again, going back to, depending on what you're doing for the rest of the day, maybe you do layer in some fats, because fats are going to blunt and slow down how fast we're metabolizing those carbs. So people with those higher metabolisms may want higher fats post-workout, literally just to blunt down and slow down the digestive process.
Alex, so someone's listening to this so far with 25 minutes, 30 minutes of some pretty exotic sounding supplements. Most people won't have heard of these. If you're tallying up the cost, you're probably at a couple of $100 a week. Creatine for some reason became like gold in the last couple of years. It became very expensive. Is there a way you could put a magnitude of what this would do to your performance? Are we purely looking at increasing the quality of what we have right now and then looking at just maximizing that? Or is this something where obviously it's not PEDs, it's not anabolic steroids, it's not anything like that, but there's people listening to this, there are a lot of natural athletes, most of our clientele, 99% of them are natural, and they're listening to this, they might have that disposable income, or they might be willing to make the changes or follow some of those suggestions. And they might be listening to this and thinking, oh, that stuff, it's not gear, so it's not really worthwhile. Is there a way you could kind of put a bit of, kind of quantitative
I gotcha.
details
Yep.
in it?
I know for a fact that I wouldn't have had gold, silver, and bronzes at this Paris Olympics if people weren't doing the things we're talking about here. Like, I try to not hold back any secrets. The basics of intra-workout nutrition, I've seen people gain 15, 20% on their performance, seemingly like overnight. In reality, it's like, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Then from there, you start layering in all of these other supplements. You get another 5%, another 5%, another 10%. And I see people getting all the way upwards of completely drastically changing their performance, their recovery, their body composition, and their daily life quality. Neurologically, they're functioning, they're firing better, blood work's getting better. And again, this is in the natural community. I see natural athletes, I think they should be taking more than anyone on the enhanced side, because they don't have the backbone pharmacology to drive anything. So if weightlifting, if your training as a natural athlete is so important to you, I don't see why you're not leveraging every single thing. Look at all of the top natural athletes out there, and very few of them are just training and eating chicken. Like, look at like 80% of them, even the people in the Olympics. I told you they come to me, they're not tracking their nutrition, but they have a long laundry list of supplements. And then if they don't, and they're already at that level, changing the nutrition, bringing the supplementation, and it goes from that 20% increase in performance to 30 to 40, I'd say upwards of 50 over the course of months or a year, depending on the level. Because if you're at the elite level, then you're not going to be 50% increase. Like, that's just not going to happen. You're not going to go from like bronze to like mega gold or whatever. But if you are someone who is not even able to qualify for the Olympics, and you start doing practices like these, and by the way, I don't have discount codes. Well, I don't have discount codes for Revive and Raw, but for all these other places, I'm not getting any kickbacks on these. So I have no reason to go out of my way to say these products, but they work that well. So it can take you from that person who can't qualify at the Olympics to potentially getting bronze or medaling in some way and variety. And again, these are with basic fatty acid supplements, but the research on them is so crazy awesome. And then you apply it, because I love research. I love books. I got a stack of books right next to me. I read them all the time, read all my research, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't apply. There's so many things over the years that on paper should work. Like, we remember all the crazes in the supplement world with, this product is putting 40% more muscle tissue on people. I won't call out the names, just good memories, because you try it and you're like, well, that didn't do anything. But then it's like, these ones are, but they don't have that hype behind them, so no one ever hears about them. So I try not to sell people on things like this. I always tell people, make your own informed decision. Take the hit, spend whatever amount of money for one product at a time for 2 or 3 months, give it a full 60 to 90 days, and just see for yourself. If that didn't work for you, cool, move on to the next thing. Because everyone responds epigenetically to everything differently. So find that one product where you respond amazingly to, keep that in forever, or rotate it, or whatever. You have that in the background. Then you go ahead and go to the next one. And you kind of trial and error your way to figure out which ones I respond best to. So then you're not just wasting money at the end of the day, but you're finding those top prime choices for you to really grow and benefit from.
So Alex, we've covered kind of some of the things you enjoy using in the last few years with your natural athletes. Just for novelty's sake, is there anything you're using that's been wildly effective? We're not necessarily talking about direct PEDs here, but things that are definitely on the fringe, or are so on the fringe that they haven't even made it onto the WADA band list just yet. Anything you're kind of messing with at the moment?
Lots. So if we kind of look at one of the most popular mitochondrial peptides right now that is really getting a lot of steam, it's SLU-PP332. To give you the backstory on this was about 6 years ago. I would have people, you find the cast number online, you have someone actually manufacture it, produce it yourself, you get it, it can be just dissolved in a liquid, super easy to do. I was using that to reverse CKD and liver failures, again, about 5 or 6 years ago, because this was pre-COVID. And I got 3 kids, so years aren't always in time with me, but I remember it was pre-COVID. So as I started to see the validity of what SLU was doing from a mitochondrial healing aspect, then I started applying it to some cardiac failure patients. Then all of a sudden I say, why aren't all my athletes taking this? It's the only mitochondrial drug peptide out there to drive up parasympathetic beta oxidation. So what we just talked about beforehand, that ability to drive fat loss in that chronic setting. So when you're resting, it's improving that. It's improving mitochondrial efficiency. It's driving up glycogen storage and synthesis. So I started using it in all of my Olympic athletes, in my powerlifters, in my strongmen, in my natural bodybuilders. Everyone was using it for a while and then made its way over into the enhanced community. And only now, I've talked about it forever, but a couple people made some videos on it over the past year or so, and it's finally blowing up. And I love that because it's such an awesome compound that very few people knew about. So I'm very proud of, I feel, obviously you're not the first one to ever do anything, but I feel like I was probably one of the first people to introduce it to the athletic community. Another one I'm super proud of is DADAS, so diisopropylamine dichloroacetate. That's the one where, again, introduced that into the Olympics 2 Olympics ago now. And what it does is the process of glycolysis. I wish I had my whiteboard because I'm used to writing all out and seeing it. If you look at glycolysis going all the way downstream and then getting that pyruvate over to ATP to generate energy, essentially, this actually inhibits an enzyme that inhibits that pyruvate to overall acetyl-CoA process. So literally what that means is unlimited energy. The problem with that, though, is people can literally exercise themselves to injury and to having real problems. So DADAS one that I introduced way back in the day, that again, it's another one where it's finally getting steam. It's not mainstream yet, but that one will probably be a lot more mainstream over the next couple months. I'm assuming 2025, that'll be pretty big. I honestly I think those are really the 2 big ones. They're the ones that a lot of people either know about, don't talk about, or don't know about and don't talk about.
Are they risky? Or are they things that you would be concerned with? Obviously, people listening we're not advising you to use them at all, but just for novelty. I know people find it interesting. We find it interesting to list about them. Is it something you'd be concerned with in terms of long-term outcomes, given that they're newer compounds?
So if we look at SLU, because there's the whole mitochondrial peptide craze right now. Mitochondria exist in a spectrum. everything else. So if you have, we're going to do a toggle right here. So over here is hyperdriving and hyper accelerating your mitochondria. This is normal kind of optimal functioning, and this is under functioning. Under functioning mitochondria means you're not going to be able to train properly. You're going to be getting sick all the time. That's dysfunction, right? You don't want that. We start improving it. Things start getting better. You start feeling better. Performance improves, everything. Then you hyperdrive. You go over the edge. And that's what's happening in the peptide community now with the longevity community and with athletes. They're pushing the mitochondrial side so hard that what happens is when mitochondria gets pushed into overdrive chronically over time, it causes a spin-off of reactive oxygen species, which causes more oxidation, more inflammation, and more damage. So after a while, and I experienced this again, like 2 to 3 years in using SLU with people, we worked up the dose to crazy high levels, and all of a sudden people are getting worse results. They're getting sick. And I'm like, how could this be happening? Mitochondria are crazy accelerated. Like, they should be only getting better. You could do some at-home mitochondrial tests and put it back into that kind of prime optimal level. So with SLU and all mitochondrial peptides, I've been, like a lot of my athletes, and what I always try and tell people is it's like everything else, it's moderation. So if you're taking SLU, don't take a crazy high dose. If you're more dysfunctional, you can up the dose. Athletes need less, and there'll be a tipping point for everyone. But then if you're going to bring in another mitochondrial peptide, like a MOTC, or again, there's tons of them out there, do them maybe one at a time or layer them in intelligently. We don't want to have 1,000 different mitochondrial players, because that's just going to result in more negative reactive oxygen species spin-off, more inflammation, more oxidation. And then on the DADA side of things, the only problem people ever run into is really tearing muscles, because it gives you so much energy and because you could push power output so crazy. Now, I will say, though, there are some non-responders. I think the number, if I had to guess, is probably around 20% of people now to this point where they just don't respond to DADA at all. With SLU, certain people can have some headaches. They can have some gynecomastia, and they can have some stomach distress, but that's very few and far between. That's probably less than 5%. They're overall very, very safe compounds, but like everything else, it exists in a spectrum. Moderation and bringing things in and out in a cyclical fashion is usually going to be your best goal.
Alex, probably one of the biggest things that we find that inhibits people's performance isn't their genetics, isn't their program or training frequency, all of which matter, of course, but very often you'll find people who are doing the correct program, they'll have a lot of things set up, but injuries are one of the big things that hold people back from kind of long-term success. Joints, tendon inflammation. What can we start doing that might be worthwhile from, again, straight and narrow, OTC, nothing exotic or weird? Like, where are we kind of starting there?
I'm going to start off with the bomb. So I'll kind of scroll back a little bit, but this will be a cool one. In the natural community years ago, I was trying to figure out how we could release our own endogenous stem cell release. So if we could release our own stem cells, so we have red bone marrow, as we age, converts more to yellow, you have less overall contribution of stem cells into circulation. So it's a CXCR4 SDF1 cascade, so the actual receptor and ligand complex. If we can displace those, or we can block like L-selectin and all these things, all of a sudden the release intra bone marrow can now be pushed out into circulation. So all of a sudden, like, cool, what the heck does that? And so you do your research, you look online, and I was having people buy tons of multiple products, dosing them crazy high, trying to find the right product. I eventually found one product, and we'll get to the name of it in a second. But the 3 ingredients I really kind of found over the time that consistently worked better and better. It's Athanazonion flossequia. It's one of the harder ones to say. There is Vahona, and then there's sea buckthorn. So literally a shrub, an algae, and an aloe. If you look at what these do, they all work 3 different ways. One is blocking L-selectin, one is driving more mobilization, one's driving more overall endogenous release of stem cells. They all technically will drive stem cell release in an hour, 2 hours, and I believe 3 hours. It's a really cool cascade that occurs, but we're dumping and donating so many of our own endogenous stem cells into circulation. So since it's endogenous, since these are basic algae, aloes, and shrubs, completely legal, completely fine. They are over-the-counter supplement. They are WADA compliant, everything. And I was never able to find like the best go-to products. I was always trying to try out new ones. Like they were decent, but I eventually stumbled onto one product called Stem Regen, which has all three of these plus other ones in there and better forms of the ones that I was utilizing with my athletes beforehand. So he has some really cool things in there too to also complement that process. He has 3 products, but I really prefer the release product. It's super expensive. I forget in euros what it costs, but it's one of the more expensive products. But something like taking Stem Regen 2 caps every single day before bed or post workout, depending on where you're trying to drive recovery, it's probably one of the best recovery players that I've ever used. And that's why I kind of wanted to bring it up first, because the owner of the company went around to all the different places in the world and basically asked everyone, what are you giving your people? Like, what are the herbs and spices and things everyone's using to fix, cardiac problems, renal problems, hepatic problems? And they go, oh, take this herb, it heals everything. Take this, it heals everything. Anytime it heals everything, it's probably stem cell related. And so the founder of the company said, oh, okay, we're going to test these things. We're going to test our own stem cell release. We're going to see what happens. And he did that process. I forget how long it was, but love that he did that, because now I believe with the release product, you can get an endogenous release of about 10,000 stem cells every single day, which is really, really awesome. No, 10 million. It's a high number, 10 million. So in that world, we're not just seeing soft tissue recovery and repair, we're seeing overall recovery, repair, overall everything. It's a great longevity player, but I think if I had to pick one, I would tell everyone just get that product. It does not, I felt it in the first week. Certain people may take, a month to clear up some damage depending on what you've had. But like my left knee was clicking for, it's probably a year at that time, just from working up my squat and things like that. And all of a sudden, again, a week or 2 weeks into taking it, that click went away. And then all of a sudden you can add a couple more sets and things start feeling better. Your sleep feels better. And so again, I always go back, the research is cool, but apply it. And I've just seen it work so many times. It is more expensive though, so it will hurt a lot of people's pocketbooks. But if we look at Stem Regen, I think that's probably one of the best ones for people to go into.
Alex, the vast majority of repetitive strain injuries or overuse injuries we get in the strength sports, weightlifting, powerlifting, bit of strongman, is we get some quad tendonitis, we get patellar tendonitis, and then we might get those achy elbows, that whether you want to call it tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, whatever, sore tendons, usually at the distal end of a muscle due to chronic tightness and some overtraining or too much volume. If an athlete's starting to present with those kind of symptoms, and you're obviously monitoring their load, changing some of their programming, what would be the initial stack that you open your laptop that night when you hear it and you go on and order these 4 things?
I think there'd probably be, so first one would be, because usually those distal problems, it's more that cyclooxygenase cascade, so COX-1, 2, like all the ones everyone knows about, that over excessive inflammation. Serratiopeptidase is a really cool proteolytic enzyme. It'll manage COX-1, COX-2 extremely efficiently. It'll pull down prostaglandins. It'll pull down interleukins. It does a great job in this world. Like I really use it heavily with my MMA guys, because in fight camp, immune system's getting tanked. They're getting that distal inflammation. Same thing over though in the weightlifting community as well. Serratiopeptidase works extremely well to manage that. So I would usually combine like that with something like a cystis quadrangularis. That's over in, again, like that basic over-the-counter herb, whatever you want to call it, community. That will drive up articular cartilage mRNA synthesis. So then it'll also take care of the surrounding joint architecture. So you have the serratopeptidase to handle the kind of lengthened portion of the muscle, that distal portion. And you have the cystis to handle the actual joint connection where it inserts at. If you do those, and then if we're going to layer more things on there, I really like a product called Penetrix. Little white one, little white tub, buy it anywhere. It has boswellia, arnica, basic localized inflammatory products. But the reason why I like that over some other topical products is because it manages excessive inflammation. So we need inflammation to grow. We need inflammation to adapt, to stay healthy. But it's only whenever there is excessive inflammation that this product actually really works. If you're just taking it day to day, there's not anything to heal, it doesn't really do anything. There's some cool health benefits, but that's not what we're talking about here. So it's only managing excessive inflammation. So if you need this much inflammation in order to progress and you're way over here, it'll pull you right back down into that range. So you would normally topically apply that enough to, cover the area, and you would do that usually morning, noon, and night for a week. Usually heals up a lot of problems, and then maybe you do it only on an as-needed basis or something like that. I'd probably start off with those 3 things, and then modality therapy wise, there's a lot, right? Like the cold plunges, those in terms of managing inflammation, in terms of driving recovery outside of the workout perimeter is awesome. So again, we want inflammation, we want stress so we can adapt from it and progress. If you're taking cold plunges in a post or pre-workout setting, we're excessively managing that inflammation. Technically, you might be able to take it pre-workout, but post-workout, we probably want to avoid. So most people, this is assuming you're like in the dead of the off season. I like to avoid any kind of cold plunging with your training, like heavy, hard training by like 2-3 hours, pre or post. Once you're getting closer to a competition though, you don't need to make more adaptation. Like you're already done, you're just trying to recover. So in that scenario, maybe during your peak week or even 2 weeks out, you do it every single day post-workout to start pulling down inflammation like crazy. That's also a really good time to start bringing in more of the fatty 15, more of the carbon 60. Carbon 60, there's one, again, going back to Wizard Sciences, they have a topical roll-on product that has a lot of other inflammatory management players. That'd be another one you can combine with the Penetrix and do it locally. So say it's whatever, your knee, you do maybe one in the morning, the other one at night, and you do some red light therapy on that area during the day for 15-20 minutes to get more of that localized mitochondrial action. And it's kind of the best of both worlds. So supplements, some therapies, and different things like that too.
So, Alex, how effective are these? Because if you look at your Instagram, there's people with magnitude of injuries and they're back training after 2 weeks when it should have been 8 weeks or 6 months or whatever. Obviously I broke my foot this year, and of course I only used herbs to fix my foot. But how effective are these? When people are hearing this, there's someone sitting there with the chronic tendonitis. We've tendinopathy, we've Swiss cheese in our patella tendons, which is a very common problem. What difference is going to make if we've been sitting here with patella tendonitis for 2 years, and they're in a place where they've been trying PRP, they've been trying cortisone injections to no avail? How effective are you seeing these particular things that you're mentioning?
Very effective, but less so than the performance and fat loss things we talked about beforehand, mainly because of the situation you just presented. So usually everyone you guys work with or I work with, they come to you and they're like, I've had bad knees for 3 years or 2 years or a year. You're kind of like, okay, we have to first reprogram to pull off excessive damage at that joint or whatever the problem area is, right? And then you start layering these things, but it's not immediate. And again, since we're in the natural community, these things take longer. So over time, I think they're career changers because we're adding years to your career. And the enhanced side of things, you're adding decades. Over here in the natural, we're still adding years. But who doesn't want more years to be able to squat heavy and deadlift heavy? So to me, these are practices that should be started now, earlier on in your career, so that you don't have this accumulation. But if you've already accumulated damage for a year, 2 years, 3 years, you could have zero articular cartilage in a joint. And that's going to be a different conversation. You go to your doctor, they could do hyaluronic acid injections, tons of cool things out there. They might be able to give you like some pentosan polysulfate to start speeding up the metabolism and driving up that chondrocyte metabolism in the area. But that's through your doctor. If you're trying to stay away from anything like that, then these things are very beneficial, but they're not as fast. So there are these longer term chronic therapies, and you almost always have to pair them with training changes. I think everyone, like you guys, the same as me, like we all get into the mindset of I'm a hard worker. I love this. I'm just going to work harder and harder and harder. And sometimes less is more. So usually pulling back your athletes is one of the best things you can do to allow these injuries to recover, to then propel forward. So it's 1 step back, 10,000 steps forward. So usually it's pairing these with a change in training and lifestyle.
Okay, so we're still following good load management principles. We're not, well, with the ones we've talked about here from natural athletes, we're still regressing, which is probably one of the biggest issues, because that's the one that will usually have gotten people into that place where they've had a bit of tendonitis, they kept training through, they trained for that competition, and then they were like, okay, next competition's coming up soon, I have to keep training. Then it's chronic tendonitis. Next thing you know, it's 2 years later, you've got MRIs in your knees, and you're in a position where you're like, oh. And then you're looking at a place where even if you deload long term, which you've seen with athletes where they've had really chronic tendon issues, for example, they deload, they might spend 6 months, a year in a place trying to get back to normal, and then they get to a place where they're just never really back to where they were. So are we looking at, for again, that natural athlete? Are we maybe not guaranteed, of course, because nothing's guaranteed in this kind of area, I suppose, but are we giving ourselves the possibility to get back to that baseline or even beyond it, do you think?
Definitely.
Straight and narrow.
Yeah, you can definitely get back, staying straight and narrow. It's always just duration and then the total pressure you're going to have to apply to it. Some people can just add in the stem regen and be fine. Other people then also have to layer in the CISIS and the red light therapy and the cold plunge. And so it really does depend on the person. I've seen so many things over the years, though. I don't think anything's impossible. Like, it sounds ridiculous to say, but we can change anything we really need to. And so it's kind of like, you may have these bad joints or things for years, but you can definitely get them better. It's more how hard you have to push to get there and how long it's going to take. But I mean, if someone wanted to dedicate a full year to being like, you know what, I'm changing my training, I'm only 27 years old or 31 years old, I want to do this till I'm 40, 50, 60, whatever, take that year, pull back on the training, put in more of the recovery modalities, do what we said beforehand with your energetics. So don't just do all the alactic work, do the glycolytic work, do your PBO walks outside, like do all the little grounding, like the things that no one really cares about, start doing them. Give yourself 6 months or 12 months. And to me, that can set people up for whole careers. But it also has to be prefaced the right way, where these things aren't going to be happening fast.
Yeah, I think last year, so we were working together in the lead up to my 300 kilo squad, and obviously I had plenty of injuries, but one of the things that didn't get injured was my knees, and I've had various knee injuries before, but even things like in the last year, I've noticed hand-eye coordination, which was always very good, as no humble brag, I suppose, just usually pretty good at sports, but it's gotten even better. If something falls out of the press in the last few months, it's really funny how fast it gets, and usually you'd assume at 31 years old, you're looking at going in the other direction, but we've been, a year and a half now, I think, so some very interesting progress in a lot of different things. And I didn't even contact you originally for performance-based stuff. I was looking at some health stuff, which we might talk about another point maybe in the future. But I suppose globally, are you, to touch on this, because this is definitely a big problem we see with a lot of people. We get these elite athletes all the way to the average Joe, where they're just in chronic pain all the time, trying to fix something, and they just want to train because they love training. Are you really optimistic? It seems like you're optimistic about the future of correcting these things. Maybe not the pace of progress, but it seems like you're really enthused by options available to people if they could only find the right place to apply it or find the right knowledge to use.
The limits are literally, there are no limits. I can't think of any other good way to say it, a more eloquent way. We can heal literally just about anything. I've seen people with crazy injuries. I told you guys before we started recording, I tore my quad. My protocol's stupid, but I'm going to fix my grade 3 torn quad in 4 weeks. That's obviously way out of the scope of this conversation. But if you can understand, we can do that, which sounds ridiculous, and then go through, we fixed bicep tears in 2 weeks. Or over in the Olympic world with natural athletes, like, we fixed injuries in half the time the doctors were saying, and that's just using over-the-counter supplements and basic modalities. Like, I've just seen way too many things and I have way too much experience to ever be kind of like a Debbie Downer about it. Things may take longer for certain people because there's always that epigenetic response too, where maybe genetically you were always supposed to have bad knees. And for whatever reason, whether it be a cartilage problem or a loading problem or mechanics problem, it's there. So who cares? Don't whine about it. Let's just fix it. And to me, even if you have those epigenetic weaknesses, that just makes more sense to push things harder on your weaknesses to improve those. Going back to what we said beforehand, Chalier's principle, fix those weak areas. So most definitely, yeah, I think as long as people understand the time frame, if you're natural, it's going to take a little bit longer, but pretty much anything can be done. And I mean, if you think about it this way, we have been able to overcome a massive virus that was killing people like crazy. So we overcame that as a society through some weird ways, but different conversation. We can reverse cancers. We can do brain surgery. We go down the list of things that are happening every single day, and you think, can I heal my elbow? Can I heal my knee? Like, yeah, well, we can. Like,
are you concerned at all, I suppose, about the recent rise in peptides, particularly TB500 and BPC157, two peptides that they've been around for kind of decades, and every year they're kind of exponentially gathering mass to the rolling stone in regards to how many people are willing to try them. You can injectable forms, nasal administration, there's oral administration. Are you concerned with the propensity which people are using them, or do you think it's a net positive?
I'm probably the worst person to ask that question to, because I see everything as a tool. So I don't, like, right now I have a grounding mat. So just to get some electron donation, I have gel pads for my elbows, literally just for the comfort factor, drive a little more dopamine. I have my red light therapy model right there. I took some Neopep before this podcast to make sure I could speak eloquently, which I screwed up a word, which I'm mad about. But like, I'm a huge fan of tools. Like, we have all this technology. Why not use it? At the same time, though, it has to fit with your core belief system. If you don't want to inject a product or take anything illegal, don't. But what's holding you back from buying a grounding mat or buying a supplement or buying all of these legal things? I think certain people in the natural community, I'm not sure why, they hold it as like this card, like I only train and I only eat food. And it's kind of like, you're also going to die when you're 60, because that is what our general population is doing. I don't say that as a negative, but that is how much our epigenetics have changed over the years. It's crazy. So to me, I go back to, it's like we have all of these tools, and if we just stay as natural as possible and just train and just eat, look at our ancestors. No one was really living to be, 100 plus, 120. With all the research we have now and all the things we're doing in the longevity community, people are going to live to be 150, 180. 180 plus is out of the conversation yet, but like, these things are going to start happening more and more. And it's going to be middle and upper class because they're obviously more expensive therapies to do, which is going to be interesting to see how the world changes there. But I mean, I love tools. Doesn't matter what it is. The grounding mat, the supplement, the pharmacology, the meditation, the nasal breathing. I think it's all important. So I think it's more picking what fits best with you personally in your moral compass.
Yeah, I think, Alex, we can finish on that kind of abstract note. So I think the overarching thing from this is to be optimistic. There's a lot of things available to you to, because a lot of the time when we deal with people, it's when problems arise, it's managing kind of expectations and reassuring people that you can get better. The fat loss thing is different, where it's kind of, if you put in the work, most people will experience fat loss unless there's really specific cases. But with the injury side of things, it gets really disheartening, because you go from this lifestyle where you go to work, you train 4 times a week, you meet your friends in the gym. Next thing you know, you can't drive your car, you can't go see your friends, and it's 6-7 weeks and you haven't really had that social outlet and you haven't been that physical activity. So I think the big thing is just to be optimistic. There is ways of definitely fixing things, because everybody has experienced themselves or knows someone who's had a chronic injury or dealt with it long term, that you get in a place where psychologically it gets quite hard for athletes. It's very rarely the pain for athletes that's the problem. It's this idea that your part of your identity is gone. So it's great to hear that while right now you might not be able to afford your stem regen and your plasmalogens and your $1,000 worth, there's things coming that can provide a better opportunity for a lot of people, which is great.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, sorry to interrupt, like, there's also so many other things you could be doing. Again, I torn my quad. I'm in pain, chronic pain 24/7. I have not stopped smiling because my life is too good, and I just refuse to have a bad day. Like, I said this to a couple people the other day, like, I could lose both my legs, both my arms. I would still be as happy as ever. I'd find a way to regrow them, but I still wouldn't change my mentality, because it's like, your perception really does change your reality. It really does. If you're the person who's always chronically mad and always just down on yourself, complaining about things, watch how the omniverse changes your world for the worse. Versus the person who's always positive, always optimistic. That doesn't mean life's not going to happen. Life happens to everyone. I didn't want to tear my quad. I feel like I'm a very good person. I feel like I'm always positive. Didn't want to tear it, but it happened. So it's life. You roll with it, you pivot, you figure it out. But that perception now is like, oh, okay, I can't squat anymore. I was working up to a 6-plate squat again, 8-plate deadlift. I was so pumped for it. That's out the window, obviously. So instead, what else can I do? Well, you know what? I can blow up my upper body and put on as much muscle as I can. I could do more mobility work for my upper body. I could do more neuroplastic work. I could spend more time with my kids. I could spend more time working. I could spend more time reading. So although you associate as the athlete who can't train the way you want to anymore, there's 1,000 different ways to train. Like, you don't just have to train with what you've been doing the whole time. Do yoga, do meditation, like, do these other things that are going to also pay off for your goal once you're back to it. And if you have that positive mindset with it, you're just going to recover faster. Of all the people I've healed, because I've healed some crazy cases, especially like in the cancer communities, it's sad. So obviously not everyone makes it in the cancer world, the majority of people that didn't make it over there is either too far gone, which, sometimes it's just a timing thing, which stinks. But the people that were negative, very rarely made it through, no matter what, their doctors did or we did or anything like that on the back end. And you look at the people that are positive, and we see more successes over there in cancer reversal rates just by the people being positive. Obviously, we had all the same therapies in place, me and their doctors doing all that kind of fun stuff, but the success rates are drastically higher in the more positive community. And if anyone likes their research, go out and look. Again, life happens. Kids are going to yell. Partner's going to yell at you. You're going to stub your toe. You're going to tear your quad. Life's going to happen. Pivot, roll with it, and make everything the best. Because you guys know I like to always say everything in life's an opportunity. So really live that and embrace that. Get that tattooed on your forehead so everyone sees that and think, oh, he must be a happy guy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more to that. Just being overtly positive all the time makes such a massive difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, where's the main place people can find you at the moment?
Theprepcoach.com, recently redone. Pretty proud of it. I didn't do it myself because I'm terrible with all that kind of stuff. Instagram is Alex_KIKEL. And then YouTube is / Alex KIKEL TPC. Those are pretty much the three places. I started at TikTok, but I barely even understand what that is. So
Thanks so much, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Definitely. Thanks for having me on, guys.